It is the 30th of April 1943, and a Spanish fisherman working the waters off the coast of Huelva notices something drifting in the shallows near the mouth of the Rio Odiel. It is a body, a man in a British Royal Marines uniform, a Mae West life jacket still inflated around his chest, a black briefcase chained to his wrist. The fisherman does not know what to make of it. He rows closer. The body is bloated, the face already beyond recognition, the uniform sodden and salt-stiffened. He calls for help. Within hours, Spanish authorities have recovered the corpse and the briefcase both. Within days, the briefcase has been quietly opened, its contents photographed, and the photographs passed to German intelligence officers operating out of Madrid. Within weeks, Adolf Hitler has personally read the documents inside and issued orders that will reshape the entire German defensive posture in the Mediterranean. The man chained to that briefcase does not exist. He never existed. His name is Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, and he is the most successful fictional officer in the history of modern warfare. This is the story of Operation Mincemeat, the deception that changed the course of the Second World War by convincing Nazi Germany that a dead man was telling the truth. To understand why Operation Mincemeat worked, you must first understand the strategic situation facing the Allied powers in the spring of 1943. The North African campaign was drawing to its close. German and Italian forces in Tunisia were collapsing, and it was becoming apparent to every senior planner on both sides that the next major Allied move would be an amphibious assault somewhere in the Mediterranean. The question was where? The obvious answer, geographically and logistically, was Sicily. The island sat like a stepping stone between North Africa and the Italian mainland. Its capture would open the central Mediterranean to Allied shipping, and its airfields would bring Allied aircraft within range of targets across southern Europe. Sicily was so obviously the correct target that the Allied High Command recognised a serious problem. The Germans knew it too. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding German forces in the Mediterranean theatre, had already begun strengthening the island's defences. Hitler himself had expressed confidence that Sicily would be the Allied objective. Fooling the Germans about a target they had already correctly identified was not merely difficult, it bordered on the impossible, and yet the potential rewards were extraordinary. If German defensive resources could be diverted away from Sicily in the weeks before the invasion, the assault that eventually landed on July 10th, 1943, might succeed with significantly lower casualties. Intelligence estimates suggested that each additional German division defending Sicily could cost thousands of Allied lives. The strategic logic was undeniable. What was needed was a deception so persuasive that it would override German common sense, compel them to redeploy forces they could not afford to move, and hold those forces in the wrong place long enough for the real invasion to establish itself. What was needed, in short, was a miracle. The miracle was conceived characteristically in a basement, the London Controlling Section. The branch of British military intelligence responsible for strategic deception had been grappling with the Sicily problem since late 1942. It was Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley of M115 who first proposed the essential idea, drawing on a concept sketched by Ian Fleming in a 1939 intelligence memo, later refined by his colleague Ewan Montague, a barrister turned naval intelligence officer. The plan was breathtaking in its audacity and meticulous in its execution. A human corpse would be obtained, dressed in the uniform of a British Royal Marines officer, and provided with a complete fictional identity, supported by an elaborate paper trail of personal documents. Attached to this corpse in a locked briefcase would be a set of apparently genuine, top-secret letters from senior British commanders, indicating that the real Allied invasion target was not Sicily at all, but Greece and Sardinia, with Sicily serving merely as a diversionary feint. The body would then be released from a British submarine off the coast of Spain, in waters where ocean currents would carry it ashore. Spain was officially neutral, but substantially pro-German, and British intelligence knew that Spanish military authorities in the relevant district routinely shared recovered Allied material with their German counterparts. The Germans would receive what appeared to be the most valuable intelligence windfall of the Mediterranean War. And they would believe it, because the alternative was to admit that a dead man had been sent to deceive them. The practical challenges were formidable, beginning with the most fundamental: obtaining a suitable body. The requirements were specific and grim. The corpse had to be male, of approximately the right age and build for the fictional officer being created, and had to have died in circumstances consistent with drowning or exposure at sea. A post-mortem examination by Spanish authorities needed to produce findings compatible with death from immersion. After careful and discreet inquiry conducted through official channels, Montague and Cholmondeley obtained the body of a 34-year-old Welshman named Glyndwr Michael, who had died in London in January 1943 after ingesting rat poison, most probably accidentally. Pathological advice suggested that the effects of the poison on his lungs would not be easily distinguishable from the effects of drowning in a post-mortem examination conducted under wartime conditions by a Spanish doctor. The body was stored in dry ice while the fictional identity was constructed around it. Major William Martin was given a service number, a photograph, a history of romantic correspondence with a fictional fiancée named Pam, receipts for an engagement ring purchased from a jeweller on Bond Street, an overdrawn bank account, a stern letter from his father, a ticket stub from a London theatre performance, and a letter from his commanding officer gently reminding him about a matter of unpaid mess bills. Every item was chosen to create the impression of a living, breathing, slightly harassed young officer who had been in London recently, whose mind was partly on his upcoming wedding, and who carried in his briefcase letters of the utmost strategic importance. The key documents themselves were drafted by Montague and approved at the highest levels of the British command, including by the Chief of the Imperial General Staff, General Sir Alan Brooke. They were written with enormous care, technically accurate enough to be convincing to a professional intelligence officer, yet just credible enough in their hints about Greece and Sardinia to be believed. On the 19th of April 1943, HMS Seraph, a British S-class submarine under the command of Lieutenant Commander Norman Jewell, departed Holyloch on the River Clyde carrying a cylindrical metal canister packed with dry ice containing the body of Major William Martin. The submarine sailed south through the Irish Sea and into the Atlantic, then east toward the Spanish coast. In the early hours of the 30th of April, approximately 1 nautical mile off the coast near Huelva, the canister was opened on deck, the body removed, the Mae West life jacket inflated, the briefcase chained to the wrist, and Major William Martin was lowered gently into the water. A rubber dinghy was placed nearby, partly deflated, to suggest the aftermath of an aircraft ditching at sea. HMS Seraph submerged and departed. The rest, as the saying goes, was left to the currents. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. What followed in Huelva was a masterpiece of espionage theatre, playing out exactly as British intelligence had hoped. The body was recovered by Spanish authorities and examined by a local doctor, whose post-mortem concluded that death was consistent with drowning following an aircraft accident. The briefcase was passed to the Spanish military, and within days its contents had been photographed by German Abwehr agents operating through their Madrid contacts. The photographs were transmitted to Berlin. German intelligence analysts examined the documents and, crucially, found them convincing. The letters were assessed as genuine. The strategic picture they painted, an Allied intention to strike at Greece and Sardinia while using Sicily as a deceptive feint, was accepted at the highest levels of the German command structure. The response was precisely what British planners had prayed for. Hitler, already predisposed toward worrying about the Balkans, issued orders transferring significant German forces. Panzer divisions were moved toward Greece. Torpedo boats were redeployed to the Aegean. Rommel was sent to Greece to oversee defensive preparations. Field Marshal Kesselring, who retained his own suspicions about Sicily, found his concerns overruled. When the real Allied invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, began on the 10th of July 1943, the island was defended by 2 German divisions rather than the 6 or more that might have been present had no deception taken place. The assault succeeded in establishing its beachhead with losses that, while severe, were substantially below what planners had privately feared. German reinforcements were slow to arrive, in part because the forces that should have been in Sicily were waiting in the wrong country for an invasion that never came. Exact figures on lives saved are impossible to calculate with precision, but historians of the campaign have suggested that mincemeat may have saved tens of thousands of Allied casualties. Some estimates reach higher. The comparison with other Allied deception operations reveals both the uniqueness and the brilliance of mincemeat. The broader deception framework for the war known as the double-cross system, involved running turned German agents to feed false intelligence continuously across multiple theatres. Operation Fortitude, the deception that preceded the Normandy landings in June 1944, was on a vastly larger scale, involving fictional army groups, fabricated radio traffic, and the careful management of every German intelligence asset in Britain. Fortitude succeeded spectacularly, persuading Hitler to withhold reserves from Normandy for weeks after D-Day. But Fortitude required years of preparation, enormous resources, and the cooperation of dozens of double agents. Mincemeat achieved its result with one body, one briefcase, and 2 officers working out of a London office with a budget that would have seemed modest by the standards of a minor government department. American deception operations in the Pacific, while inventive, generally operated at a tactical rather than strategic level, redirecting enemy attention for days rather than weeks. The Soviet maskirovka tradition, though formidably effective in operations such as the deceptions preceding Operation Bagration in 1944, operated at army group scale with resources and manpower that dwarf anything the British could deploy. What made Mincemeat singular was its economy. It was a strategic deception of the first order achieved by 2 men, a dead body, and an extraordinary quantity of patience and imagination. The legacy of Operation Mincemeat extends well beyond the beaches of Sicily. Its success confirmed for the Allied High Command that strategic deception was not merely a useful adjunct to military planning, but a genuine force multiplier of the highest order. The London Controlling Section expanded its operations, its methods became more sophisticated, and the lessons of Mincemeat fed directly into the planning of Fortitude. The concept of the planted document, the false intelligence asset carried by an apparently credible source, became a standard tool of intelligence tradecraft whose influence persists to the present day. Ewan Montagu published an account of the operation in 1953 under the title The Man Who Never Was, which became an international bestseller and was subsequently adapted into a 1956 film of the same name. The book broke the official silence around the operation and introduced the story to the general public for the first time. Ben McIntyre's 2010 account, simply titled Operation Mincemeat, drew on newly declassified material to produce what is now the definitive narrative of the operation, revealing for the first time the full identity of Glinda Michael as the man whose body made everything possible. Glinda Michael is buried in the municipal cemetery of Huelva, Spain, under a headstone that now bears both his real name and his assumed one, Major William Martin, Royal Marines. He served his country better in death than most men manage in a lifetime of service. Return now to that Spanish shoreline on the 30th of April, 1943. The fisherman has found his body. The briefcase is already being carried toward the hands of men who will photograph its contents and pass those photographs north and east toward Berlin. Adolf Hitler will read what is inside and move his armies. Panzer divisions will rumble toward Greece. Torpedo boats will be repositioned in the Aegean. And on the beaches of Sicily, on the 10th of July, 10 weeks from now, Allied soldiers will wade ashore against defences that are thinner than they should be, and some of them will live who would otherwise have died, and they will never know why. They will not know about the body in the water. They will not know about the briefcase and the chain and the letters written by men in a London basement who understood that the most powerful weapon in war is not a gun or a bomb or a tank. It is a story told convincingly enough to the right audience at exactly the right moment. Britain told that story with a dead man's body and a fictional officer's name, and Nazi Germany believed every word. Operation Mincemeat did not merely deceive an enemy, it proved beyond any reasonable argument that imagination properly applied is worth more than a division in the field. Major William Martin never lived, but the men he saved were real, and that in the end is all that matters.